And as I will show you in a second, the idea of early Buddhism is basically to go back to the word of the Buddha and to ask, what did the Buddha talk about in terms of these things? And the idea of right stillness is called Sammāsamādhi in the Pali language. Sammāsamādhi, those of you who are born in Buddhist countries will probably know some of these words. So Sammāsamādhi, this is the end of the Noble Eightfold Path. If you think back, you will remember that we are looking at the Noble Eightfold Path, starting out with right view, Sammaditthi, and coming all the way down to Sammāsamādhi at the very end. So this is like the culmination of the Noble Eightfold Path. That's exciting, isn't it? This is kind of all the factors coming together into one thing, and that thing is called right stillness. It's like everything kind of working together. So it's very interesting, and of course you can imagine that because it is the culmination of the Noble Eightfold Path, it's also very inspiring, very interesting, very profound, very deep. There's something about right stillness that we're going to show during this workshop is actually very kind of wow, there's a big wow factor, and the wow factor is probably much larger than most people actually appreciate and realize. Very often we get wrong ideas about right stillness. Anyway, so let's get started with these slides. So right stillness in early Buddhism. So it is working, that's good. Well done, Conrad. And so we're looking at, as I said, early Buddhism. And early Buddhism is characterized by these things we call the EBTs. EBTs are early Buddhist texts. And I just want to, for those of you who are new, who haven't been here before, how many have not been here before to these workshops? Only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay, well you guys, you are all experts in suttas anyway, so, but maybe the one, so the EBT's, early Buddhist text, is this idea that in Buddhism we have a large variety of texts. We have the Mahayana schools of Buddhism, we have the Theravada schools of Buddhism, we have the Vajrayana, which is the Tibetan Buddhism, and within Theravada, within Theravada, again, there's a large number of texts. And these texts come from different people, from different times. They have a different kind of have a certain chronological order to them, when they were written down, who they were spoken by, and all of these kind of things. And as I was saying yesterday, during my Dhamma talk yesterday, is that all of these texts that we have in Buddhism, whether they are Vajrayana, Mahayana, whether they are early Theravada, late Theravada, medium Theravada, super late Theravada, this is like what we're saying now, this is a super late Theravada, which is coming out at this moment. All of this goes back to one source. All of this refers back to one thing, and that is the word of the Buddha, the early Buddhist text. This is the foundation for everything else. Nothing has a meaning without those other early Buddhist texts, and this is why the word of the Buddha is so incredibly important in Buddhism. Everything relies on that. Take those away, everything collapses like a house of cards. Nothing really remains standing. So these are very important things, and the interesting thing is that people often wonder, how can we really know what the Buddha taught? Because the Buddha lived 2,500 years ago, etc., etc. And the answer is yes, we can know with a fairly high degree of certainty, because there is a certain uniformity to those texts. When you read them, you get the feeling of consistency, of kind of ideas being the same across the board, the language being the same, the geographical area in which they were spoken is the same. There's a feeling of a consistency within those texts that you do not find with other texts. So we know what they are. Basically, we know what the word of the Buddha is. And that's kind of cool, isn't it? Because the word of the Buddha, if this is the founder of this teaching, if the Buddha is the person that we kind of look back to, he started all of this, he is the one who is insight we have to take for granted. It's kind of nice to know that we have a very good idea what is the word of the Buddha. Maybe not all the little details, but as a general idea of the doctrines that he taught and the ideas that he left for the rest of humanity. So this is why this series is called Series on Early Buddhism, because it is all about going back to those earliest sources and ask ourselves, how did the Buddha say these things? And then anyone who comes afterwards, anyone who expresses these ideas in the commentaries or the Abhidhamma, Buddhaghosa, whoever it is, they have to measure up against those suttas. And if they don't measure up to the suttas, then there is a problem. So you want to know what the Buddha taught. Does that make sense to everyone? Or do anyone think I'm talking complete nonsense? Yeah, you are welcome to say so. Please raise your hand. Sorry, Venerable, or whatever you want to call me. I don't agree with this. It's fine to disagree, because then we can have a bit of a discussion. By the way, I should say, I was given this beautiful pair of glasses yesterday. I'm just going to put them on. You can have a look. Does it look all right? I can even see what's on the screen. That's very handy. So very kind donors who came together and did that. That's wonderful. So these are what we are going to look at. So we're going to have a quick look at what the aims of this workshop is and what we're trying to achieve. There's going to be, as Leihard has said before, 3 workshops, and 2 of them we're hoping for asunyo, 1 of them sunyo. So we're going to see what happens. Asunyo means non-empty, sunyo means empty, so only 1 empty seat over here. So first aim is to understand the importance of Sammāsamādhi. Yeah, this is right stillness on the path. And this is what we're going to focus on mostly today. And it's the idea of putting it into the system to understand why it matters, to understand how it works with the other factors, how it actually achieves its aim of being part of the Buddhist path, and then giving the results, which are insight, nibbana, all of these profound things that we're trying to achieve on the path. And this is you'll be surprised how controversial this may be in contemporary Buddhist circles. If you read the early Buddhist texts, I would say it's not controversial at all. It's bleeding obvious that this is really important and really significant, and we're going to see some reasons for why this is later on. It's bleeding obvious because it's everywhere in the sutta. There's actually, it's just you can't barely open the books without seeing the word jhana. Jhana is another word for Sammāsamādhi. It's absolutely everywhere. And so it is rather curious why it is so controversial in modern Buddhist circles. So we need to establish this, why this really is important from the suttas, just to give you the confidence that when you hear someone who says the opposite, you can stand your ground. Yeah, you don't have to say anything, but in your mind you can stand your ground. That's what matters. No need to argue too much. That just causes problems. This is the first aim of the workshop. Second aim, as always, is to clear away some misunderstandings. Lots of misunderstandings about this in Buddhism. Every topic that we have been talking about so far, we had a whole day talking about myth busting. This was Bhante Sujato's original idea, myth busting. I think there was a TV series called Mythbuster or something like that. So it was kind of based on that TV series, which I have never seen, of course. But anyway, it was there. And again, large number of misunderstandings about what Sammāsamādhi is, what it is not, how it fits in, is it necessary or not? Can you become a stream mentor without jhana? This is kind of one of the favorite questions we get all the time, and we're going to answer that once and for all during this workshop. Bang, finished. No, I'm just joking. There's no such thing as once and for all answers, right? There's always more arguments. This is the nature of life, unfortunately. So there's never a final answer. Isn't that kind of scary? This is one of the biggest, or one of the really disheartening things about samsaric existence, is that there is no such thing as a final answer until you are enlightened. Of course, if you're enlightened, there's no problem. Before that, there is no final answer. And this is kind of scary, because it means that we're always kind of, always moving around, always being conditioned by one thing. Sometimes we are closer to the truth, other times we are further away from the truth. This idea that there is you can study the suttas till you are blue in the face, or whatever it's called. You can keep on studying the suttas, and still there comes a time when you have to take your stand on something, but there is no final answer really to many of these questions. And that is because it is a matter of interpretation. It's a matter of understanding the Buddha, what he said. It's a matter of, there is we're dealing with words, and with words, it's not like experience. Experience is maybe 100% clear personally, but words are always going to be a little bit dodgy and a little bit dicey. All you can do is do your best. So we clear away misunderstandings, and hopefully we will not create too many new misunderstandings. That's kind of the ideal of this workshop. But be on your guard, yeah. And if you think that there is new misunderstandings being introduced in the as we try to take away the misunderstandings, please feel free to speak up. Yeah, I'm not very dangerous as a person, so you can talk to me, and I will not bite back or anything like that. So please don't be afraid of challenging me if you think that what I'm saying is might be dodgy or you have an alternative viewpoint or whatever it might be. So then we come to the last point, and that is to find out what the Buddha meant by Sammāsamādhi. It's going to be the last day. Hello, Mon, welcome. It's going to be the last day of this 3-day workshop. And this is also very important, because one of the things that you will discover very soon as you start to discuss Buddhist ideas is that the idea of things like jhana and Sammāsamādhi are widely discussed. What do they actually mean? What they refer to? Even if we agree that jhana is important, what is that jhana? Is there jhana light? Yeah, like light jhana? Is there jhana kind of jhana light versus jhana real? That's kind of biasing the discussion a little bit, to put it that way. Jhana light versus jhana heavy? Is there kind of commentarial jhana versus sutta jhana? Is there all kind of different kinds of samadhi? What is actually going on here? We need to be very careful. We're going to spend quite a bit of time discussing what these things actually are, what kind of mental states they are, bring out some of the discussions found in the suttas. All right, so that is the aim of the workshop. So now let's move. I can't remember what's coming next now. We just have to see. The place of Sammāsamādhi on the path. Okay, so we're going to now look at Sammāsamādhi, and we're going to look at some of the contexts in which it occurs in the suttas. So again, Sammāsamādhi is right stillness. This is according to Ajahn Brahm's translation. So here we go. So here we are looking at the Noble Eightfold Path, which this workshop series is about. And of course, as we have seen, the Noble Eightfold Path, it starts out with the idea of right view. And then we have all the other factors, and then you have right mindfulness down the track. Right mindfulness is the second last one before we come to right stillness at the very bottom. So what is this path? Just to summarizing, what is this path really about? And what this path is about, it's a path, it's known as the Visuddhimagga in certain places, right? The Visuddhimagga means the path of purification. And this is one of these famous works that were written by a monk called Buddhaghosa in about the 5th century AD. But really, the path of purification, as I like to say, is not really the work of Buddhaghosa. The Noble Eightfold Path is a path of purification. So we start off with right view, and right view in this context can be understood as the view that it is important to purify the mind. Yeah, purification matters. If you're going to purify yourself, the only way you're going to do that, if you think it is important, if you think purification is nonsense, if you think defilements are cool, then you're going to have a problem. Yeah, defilements, okay, fun games in the world. And that's how people often think. They're not really able to see that these things may be problematic, that there's something more beyond these things. Anger, righteous indignation. I'm going to kind of sort out the world, but you have to have that energy that comes from anger. Anger is good. Otherwise, how are we going to deal with climate change or whatever else it is? I saw to my horror someone recently, they were kind of arguing that to sort out all the environmental problems that we have in the world, violence is going to be required. And I thought, violence is, from a Buddhist point of view, is a far more destructive force in society than climate change. Violence really destroys our societies. Climate change, we will be able to deal with it somehow. Worst comes to worst, we make good karma, we get reborn in a good place afterwards. I mean, you can never go wrong with kindness in Buddhism. And this is kind of the problem with wrong view. The idea of climate change is so important that you can kind of destroy other people's lives as a means to achieve the goal of securing the climate, and you don't secure the climate anyway, and all you do is end up with violence and bad things. So you have to have the view that purification is important. This is one way of thinking about right view. Another way of thinking about right view is understanding the difference between happiness and suffering here, and all of these other ways. But it comes down to some very simple things like that. And of course, then once you have that right view, then the process of purification happens as a matter of course from that idea of right view. You think right view you think purification is important, you get the intention to purify yourself, and then the rest of this path is actually that gradual purification of the mind, stage by stage, step by step, through the silas, the actions, the speech, the livelihood, then the right effort, which purifies the mind, and then the right mindfulness, which is then the final stage of purification, where you abandon all the little defilements of the mind. So, right mindfulness is basically like breath meditation, right? Watching the breath, that's what right mindfulness is about. Just to remind you of that. Where does that breath meditation take you? That right mindfulness, it takes you to right stillness. This is the culmination of this path. Coming at the end, you're watching the breath in the right way, giving rise to all the qualities that we're talking about on this path, and then right stillness is the outcome of that. It's the pinnacle of this whole process of purification. And that tells you something already about the idea of right stillness, what it is. It has this idea. It is a very purified state of mind. It is a mind where the mind is rid of all of these kind of impurities. And that may not sound all that exciting. Pure, pure. Who cares about pure? It kind of sounds boring to be pure, because it means like you're some kind of, you're kind of clad in white and you're kind of behaving like an angel. It sounds like very boring. But actually, the point here is that when we talk about being pure, in the Buddhist point of view, is that it comes with so many other positive qualities. Purity actually means happiness. It means liberation. It means freedom. It means joy. It means all of these very, very positive things. So purity is not some kind of thing which kind of ordinary people in society might look down upon because it sounds boring, being pure. It may, used in the wrong way, it will. But actually, it is a these are very powerful and beautiful states of mind. And this is kind of the point of this. So it leads up to this, and this is the idea of right stillness on the path. So, right stillness, coming at the end of all of this, all of these factors coming together. But where does it lead to? What is the purpose of stillness? And there is an alternative expression in Buddhism, or in the suttas, which is not the Eightfold Path, but the Tenfold Path, maybe tenfold result, or tenfold something. So what is the result of right stillness? And this is where it becomes interesting. So this is the result of what comes after that. In other words, what are the results of the Eightfold Path, in a sense? Right understanding, Sammāsamādhi. And this is kind of also quite fascinating. Because very often when we talk about right understanding in Buddhism, we talk about vipassana meditation, we talk about contemplating the rising and passing away of things, all of these sort of things. But you will notice here that the thing that leads you to right understanding is actually right stillness. This is the critical factor here. There's nothing here about watching rising and falling at all. The whole Eightfold Path, it isn't mentioned even once. I'm not saying it is not part of it. It may be part of it, but it's not kind of obviously part of it. The thing that actually leads to right understanding here is watching the breath, achieving right stillness, Sammāsamādhi, and then you will see things according to reality. It is so straightforward. It's very simple. It is this is actually the required thing. And so this is very important to remember. What that means, of course, is that in our practice as Buddhists, if you are very serious about meditation practice, the question that we should ask is always, how can we achieve this right stillness? Because that is the critical factor that leads to right understanding. This is what we need. I'm not saying that the idea of, contemplating things arising, things passing away is not part of it. It is part of it. But it is part of it in such a way that it leads to right stillness. It is not a separate factor of the path. It is included within these other factors, which basically is watching the breath, mindfulness of breathing, achieving right stillness, and then understanding things according to reality, which is right understanding. This is, I think, really significant and really important to grasp. Once you grasp that, you understand what you should be aiming for in your practice. And especially if people say, actually right stillness, you don't really need that because it just gets you stuck on the path and, much better to kind of contemplate things arising and passing away. Be very skeptical when you hear those things because basically it goes against the general idea of the path. Right understanding. So what does right understanding lead to? Right understanding leads to right liberation. Yeah. So when we see the world in the right way, then that leads to liberation. Yeah, the truth sets you free. I think that's a biblical quote. The truth. I shouldn't really be quoting the Bible here, but but anyway, that's what it says in the Bible. And I think we can take that on board here as well. Yeah, the truth. If you see things in the right way, actually it liberates you, sets you free. Yeah, and it kind of makes sense. Yeah. When we see things in the right way, of course, it's going to be liberating because it allows us to act and live in accordance with the truth. And if you live in accordance with falsehood, of course, it's going to be problematic because you're going to do all kind of missteps as a consequence. So again, liberation is recommended, right? It's kind of a good thing here. It's not some kind of negative thing here. So, place of Sammāsamādhi on the path, squeezed between the breath and right understanding here. How the breath gives rise, the humble breath gives rise to right understanding on the path. It happens via right stillness, Sammāsamādhi. Let's have a look at one more sequence before we open up for a few questions. I'm going to open up for questions roughly every half an hour so we can have some discussion about these issues. More places of Sammāsamādhi on the path. You can see the faint outline at the top there. It says place of Sammāsamādhi or something like that. Well, I can't see anything. I can see it's blur. So now we're going to look at this from the point of view of the awakening factors. These are the Sambojjhangas, Satta Sambojjhangas, the 7 factors of awakening here. Very important set of dhammas or qualities on the Buddhist path. And this is another way of understanding the process, how, or the position of Sammāsamādhi. And so this begins with the awakening factor of mindfulness, Sati Sambojjhanga in the Pali. And this is basically equivalent to watching the breath, equivalent to the Satipatthanas and all of that. So you start with that. And from that you get the awakening factor of investigation. This is the Dhammavicaya Sambojjhanga. And this is like a furthering of the mindfulness practice. This is kind of more of the same. It is similar to what you see in the Satipatthana Sutta. Satipatthana Sutta, you have 4 Satipatthanas. You have the Kaya-nupassana, Veda-nupassana, Chitta-nupassana, Dhamma-nupassana. Okay, for those of you who don't know Pali, Kaya-nupassana, contemplation of the body, contemplation of feelings, Vedana-nupassana, Chitta-nupassana, contemplation of mind, Dhamma-nupassana, contemplation of qualities, principles. The translations vary a little bit. So this is similar to that. You investigate to help you purify your mind even further. And as you purify this mind even further, the energy comes about. Because energy arises naturally in a pure mind. You can know the purity of your mind to some extent by energy. Now this is one of the kind of maybe underestimated factors of Sammādi. What's Sammādi? Sammādi has all of these beautiful qualities to it. And one of the qualities of Sammādi is the energy that comes with Sammādi. And by energy, I do not mean the effort or the willpower or whatever you put forth. By energy is the natural energy of the mind. All you have to do is eliminate the hindrances. If you have no energy, it's because there are attachments and hindrances in your mind. You know straight away that is the reason. So this is a consequence of the abandoning of hindrances and attachments. Energy comes about. And I always remember I was very impressed. I've always been very impressed by Ajahn Brahm. The first time I heard about Ajahn Brahm, I knew straight away he's my teacher. That's kind of how it was for me. And I came to Australia. This is kind of weird how I told the story here before of how I became a kind of Buddhist. I gradually became a Buddhist, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know any Buddhists. I didn't know anything at all. So I took the white pages. I looked in the BUD, and I found Buddhist Society. This was in England, so I called up and asked them, where is the nearest monastery? They said, okay, go to Amaravati in Chittor. So I went there, and that's how my monastic career started. And then I read this paper. There was another person there. I said, yeah, there's this really cool monk called Ajahn Brahm. I thought, oh yeah, really? Okay, let's hear more about Ajahn Brahm. So he had this letter from Ajahn Brahm, and so he showed me the letter, and I read the letter, and then I heard a bit more about him. I said, this is my teacher. And then I just took the phone and called Ajahn Brahm, and I said, can I come to Australia? And he said, yep, you can come to Australia. So I came to Australia. That's how I ended up here. It's kind of a bit random, isn't it? Looking back, it's kind of really weird when I think back to the story. But at the time, it kind of seemed, okay, well, this is the way to do it. So Ajahn Brahm has always been kind of my hero in many ways. You know how I've been kind of clinging on to Bodhinyana for the last 30 years. Some people say I'm attached, but I say I'm just being wise staying here. So there's different ideas of the same thing. But one of the things that he said, which kind of stuck in my mind, he said that, you go into a state of samadhi and you become energetic like a nuclear reactor. You get like this nuclear reactor energy. That's what you feel like when you come out of samadhi. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. That's really that kind of really gives an idea what is going on. And this is one of the factors that I think is often underappreciated with samadhi. It's a very powerful energetic state, very powerful energy. And this is one of the things that enables the mind to penetrate the truth, that energy in the mind. But it is a particular kind of energy. And so what does that energy lead to? And that energy leads to the awakening factor of rapture. This is piti. So it's energy that comes with happiness, very profound degree of happiness. It's not just any kind of energy. Energy and happiness combined. And then that rapture leads to the next one, which is tranquility. And these three things together are a very kind of interesting way to think about the idea of samadhi, Sammāsamādhi, energy, happiness, rapture, and tranquility all coming together. And this is really what samadhi is about. And very often in our ordinary existence and life, we think about tranquility, maybe being a little bit dull. I feel tranquil, but I don't really feel all that sharp. Or maybe you're sharp, but the sharpness comes with restlessness. You're kind of putting forth a degree of effort or whatever. But here, it is this very unusual combination of incredible sharpness, incredible energy. Mindfulness is very strong, because mindfulness is another factor here. The happiness is strong, and the tranquility is strong. All of these things coming together. And because these things coming together to a very, very high degree, you know that you are dealing with something very unusual. This is not how we normally experience the world. So this is kind of what all of these things coming together, all of these things building up more and more and more, all that leads to awakening factor of stillness. And from that awakening factor of stillness comes the awakening factor of equanimity. So let's focus on those last three just a little bit. So tranquility, this then is the thing that leads to stillness. This gives you an idea of why right stillness is the right or a good translation for samadhi, tranquility leading to right stillness. And then that right stillness, because the mind is very powerful and very still, it then leads to equanimity. Equanimity, the awakening factor of equanimity in Pali is the upekkha sambojjhanga. And upekkha quite literally means to look on something. So you are observing, you're looking on. And of course the idea when you have Sammāsamādhi is that your looking on is going to be very still, powerful, pure, uninvolved, unbiased, unattached. without defilements. And that is really the critical thing. You're observing things as they actually are, without the mind really being biased one way or the other. That is why it's called looking on, without any... once you are involved, you're not really looking on anymore, then you are involved. But this is standing back and understanding things in the right way. So Sammāsamādhi, stillness, gives us this ability to look on, and that is why it leads to right knowledge, as we saw before, right understanding, because we can see things in an unbiased way. The deeper that right stillness is, the more powerful that equanimity is going to be. And they say that the equanimity peaks when you come to the fourth jhana. When you come to the fourth jhana, then it becomes the most powerful of all. And we get the highest equanimity that you can get in samsaric existence happens around that point. Everything beyond that doesn't really add to the equanimity here. So that is the idea of right stillness in the context of the 7 awakening factors. Now I'm going to have to disappoint you a little bit. I'm just talking about equanimity and things. Now I'm going to have some coffee. Is that... I always feel like a hypocrite. You talk about these high things and you just do the exact opposite afterwards. It's kind of... It was very nice. Yesterday I got this email came to me, and this email said, "Oh, Ajahn, hi Ajahn, what kind of coffee can I bring you tomorrow?" Isn't that kind of nice email to get? It's like really beautiful. You just sit there and you're doing your business or whatever, and this email comes in. What kind of coffee can I bring? It's really, really, really nice when those kind of things happen. And I would sit here, and sure enough, the exact coffee that I asked for comes right here. Yeah, it's kind of wonderful. It's like magic. One of those most wonderful things about being a Buddhist monk is to actually see all that kindness of people in action. It's just really remarkable. And as a Buddhist monk, you see this more than lay people, because you're often the beneficiary of so much of that kindness. And that's really, really wonderful. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked as usual. Let me just carry on with one more sequence before we take a break, because it's kind of on the same track. So this is the sequence. All of these sequences many of you will have seen before, because these are standard sequences that we talk about in Buddhism, and I love to talk about these things myself. And this is sometimes known as dependent liberation sequence. And it always starts out with good ethics, good morality, kindness, living in a good way. And from that good ethics come no regrets. If you live really well, you don't really have any regrets in your life. And that's very nice, to live without regrets. And you know what regrets does to you. It kind of makes the mind a bit darker, makes it more restless. It makes it less joyous, less bouncy, less all of these good qualities that we're trying to achieve. So when you have no regrets, you have the opposite. You get the joy. This is the pamudja. And you will notice here again and again the same kind of qualities, coming, being the precursors for Sammāsamādhi. Then we have the rapture, like we saw before. From the rapture comes the tranquility. You can see exactly the same thing. It's the same sequence, but from a slightly different perspective. Here starting out with ethics. Then we have the bliss. So here we're adding a fact. This is sukha in Pali. And then from that bliss, that's where the stillness arises. Now here it says stillness. It does not say right stillness. Is there a difference? Not really, because sometimes it says stillness, sometimes it says right stillness in exactly the same position, within exactly the same context. So these are basically just synonyms, just different words used for different reasons. So here, again, the same ideas, the same things that are the factors that make up stillness, tranquility and happiness, and all of that arising from good ethics. I always like to make the point that the most important thing that we can do as Buddhists, if you want to enjoy good meditation, is our sila. This is really the critical factor. And you find this everywhere on the path. And here, the sequence that we see here is an automatic sequence. You sit back, you follow Ajahn Brahm's instruction, don't do anything. I know how many people get frustrated with that instruction, but it doesn't work, Ajahn. I don't do anything, and all that happens is I fall asleep, or I think, or whatever. Okay, ethics. That's the problem, right? You haven't done enough ethics yet. That's the reason why it doesn't work. If the ethics, the sila, is good enough, this sequence works all by itself. So ethics is the critical issue for every one of us. So always come back to this idea. How can you purify yourself even more? How can you be even more kind? How can you think differently? How can you give people more the benefit of the doubt, etc., etc., etc.? And as you do that, this process starts to work. So, but again, the process is essentially the same. And then, from that stillness, comes the truly knowing and seeing. Yeah, Yata Bhuta Jnanadasana in Pali. Last time it was called Samma Jnana, right knowledge. Now it's called knowing and truly knowing and seeing. These are roughly synonymous with each other. There isn't any great difference. And then from that you get aversion and dispassion. You reject the world, you get dispassionate to the world, and from that comes the knowledge and vision of liberation. But again, the critical core here is this particular core here. Yeah, stillness. Last time we saw that stillness was based on tranquility. Now we see that it is based on bliss. Yeah, that powerful happiness which is part of stillness. And again, it gives an idea what is going on. I won't preempt too much of what I'm going to say later on, but you can see how the process is the same. And from that, once again, you get truly knowing and seeing. Now, I should make the point, I'm going to stop in a second now, but I should make the point that these particular things I'm showing you right here, these are some of the core teachings you find in the suttas. And by core teaching, I mean something that you find again and again and again in different contexts, taught to different people, from different angles, with the seven awakening factor being the same as dependent liberation, being the same as the sequence of mindfulness of breathing. Yeah, these are core things because they occur everywhere. This is not some kind of a little teaching that I favor and that's why I bring it out. No, these are really critical, fundamental aspects of the Buddhist path. And the only way you will be able to know that is if you read the suttas yourself. When you start reading the suttas yourself, then you will gain the confidence that what I'm saying is actually correct. If you don't read them yourself, you have to rely on what I say. Yeah. So if you think I'm a dodgy character, don't rely on me. If you think I'm trustworthy, then you can rely on me. I'm trying my very best to be trustworthy, but everyone makes mistakes. So don't trust me too much. Find that right balance. Yeah, it's an important point to always remember that. So this is a rough idea about the place of samadhi on the path. The factors that give rise to samadhi and what its purpose is. The purpose is to see things according to reality. Here we see it again. There's nothing in the sequence either about contemplating things arising and passing away, etc. It is really stillness that is the cause for seeing things in the right way. And I think it again is a very, very important point to keep in mind because it is counter to how we often think about Buddhist teachings in Buddhist circles. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there are any questions. Leihar, the boss, has said 3 questions max. Is that right, Leihar? It's very nice to be able to say someone else is the boss. You know, it really kind of takes the pressure off. So thank you.
I can take the blame, Ajahn.
Taking that role, yeah. So, yeah.
Are these the ones coming from the monastery?
These are all the monastery people, but yeah.
I'm not sure who first.
I have a question about the awakening factors.
Okay.
This is a sequence, and is it ideally the sequence in a meditation, in one sitting, for instance, and also a sequence over longer time periods? Yeah. And do parts of it vanish if others come out? Like discernment, does it vanish if stillness comes out?
Okay, so thank you for that question. That's a good question, and I appreciate that. So here they are, just for our reference. So first of all, yes, it is sequential, and almost everything in the suttas are sequential in one way or another. Almost everything is like that. And sometimes the sequence is a causal sequence. And in this case, it is a causal sequence. And we know that because that is how it is explained in other suttas. The Noble Eightfold Path is a causal sequence. The 7 factors of awakening are a causal sequence. The 5 spiritual faculties are a causal sequence. Yeah, one thing leading to another. That doesn't mean the causal is always in one direction only. Sometimes there's also feedback. But the main causal sequence is from the first one to the last one. So without mindfulness, you're not going to be able to get anywhere. That's why mindfulness is first. But with energy and rapture, mindfulness is going to be empowered. So there's also a feedback loop at the same time. But the main sequence here is from mindfulness to equanimity, everyone leading to the next one. So yes, as you meditate and as your meditation deepens, this is what you can expect to find in your meditation as well. It will arise in roughly this sequence as you do that. Of course, when you get energy, there will tend to be also some kind of happiness there already. So it's important to read the various versions of the sequence to understand that there is different degrees of happiness, different degrees of energy, different degrees of tranquility. So the general idea is that energy, tranquility, and happiness will grow as you go through this process. That is the main thing, right? And exactly, so sometimes in the suttas you will see, for example, after tranquility there is sukha, right? That's a deeper kind of happiness. So in one, maybe the best way to think about it is that energy, tranquility, and happiness growing together, stage by stage by stage. It is not as if energy comes first, there's no happiness, then all the happiness comes, there's no energy. Yeah, that's not how it works. They actually tend to come together, but for purpose of still, making it into a comprehensible system, you have to have this kind of sequence in one way or another. So that is the first thing. Yes, there is a clear sequence here. And the second thing, of course, yes, is that over time, this sequence should develop. Yeah, so maybe now you only get to the, little bit of happiness, but a year down the track, you should get more profound happiness in your practice. So it is within one meditation that develops, but also it develops over time, so that hopefully down the track it will become more profound. Did I answer all the questions, or was there more? There was one more, wasn't there? What was the last one you said? I forgot your...
Do some of the factors vanish if others arise?
Yeah, not really. They're just building up on each other. So the previous factors will still be there. Yeah. So mindfulness, for example, is the founding factor. In fact, not only are they still there, they become more stronger as you move on, right? They become more and more powerful. So mindfulness becomes more and more powerful.
But how can discernment be still there if there is stillness?
How can they...
Discernment?
Well, you mean the Dhammavicaya? Well, the idea here is that something like discernment or Dhammavicaya is a faculty of the mind that is available to you, and you can use it if you want to use it. And that ability to discern will be more powerful the deeper you go. So it doesn't mean that you actually do investigate all the time. It means that investigation is available to you if you need to use it. In that sense, it becomes more powerful. Yeah. Okay. Who is next? Eric? Okay.
Hi, Ajahn.
Yeah.
So Ajahn Brahm often talks about lights, the nimittas, seeing lights in the mind. Can you relate this to the awakening factors and the other sequence?
Okay, so it is easier in a sense to see that when you look at the Anapanasati Sutta, because there it is kind of obvious where it kind of fits in. Because in the Anapanasati Sutta you have 4 tetrads, 16 steps altogether, 4 tetrads, and the first tetrad means a group of 4, right? So the first group of 4 is equivalent to body contemplation. The second group of 4 is equivalent to feeling contemplation. The third group of 4 is equivalent to the mind contemplation. And it starts off by Chittang Pattisang Vedi, I think is the first one. It means experiencing the mind. And experiencing the mind, well, that will then mean an experience whereby the 5 senses are starting to fade away. And when the 5 senses start to fade away, what is left is the mind. And that would then be often experienced as a light or something like that. You can see that there is a direct proportionality between these kind of lights and the presence of the five senses. They kind of are counter to each other in a sense. So on this particular path, where would that come? Maybe around tranquility, probably. Roughly around that area. Rapture is still in the has to do with feelings, the second tetrad, and then tranquility is probably roughly where you can talk about these things. But remember that, I don't think, this is kind of a gradual movement, right? So I don't think there is any absolute correlation here, but roughly that would be what it is. Okay, anyone else want to say anything? Prem over there, Prem has just come out of hospital, so we need to kind of give him the.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Is this a right understanding? Extension of the very first step, which is Sammāsamādhi, right view. You need review to get the clear understanding, I guess. Isn't it?
Absolutely, indeed. And this is, I think, a very important point, and that is that as you progress on the Noble Eightfold Path, not only do you go forward, but you also actually empower the states beforehand. All the other qualities beforehand actually do get empowered. So the more you see in accordance with reality, yata buddhananadasana or sammanyana, the more that will then feed back into right view and actually feed back into all the previous ones, but especially right view. Because every time you become more peaceful, you have a better understanding of where happiness is to be found in the world. Every time you see things becoming more stable in your meditation, you have things fading away, you have an understanding of impermanence, etc. So absolutely, with every step, you actually reinforce the previous ones, and your knowledge grows, your understanding grows, and eventually, of course, you become a stream entry. We had a question yesterday about what actually is stream entry. What stream entry really is, this full insight into these things, and that is where your right view becomes firmly established once and for all. So that's a good point.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Ajahn, we've got 2 questions online. You want to take the 2 questions?
Sure, let's take them.
Okay. And then he can take a sip of his coffee. Okay, so there's a question from Mani Subramanian. How can we remove resentment with this practice?
Resentment really has to be removed before you get to this practice. Once you start to get into the awakening factor of mindfulness, and especially with Sammāsamādhi, then the resentment will already be gone a long time ago. So the removal of resentment really comes under the factor of right effort. So Mani, please go back to the workshop on right effort, and we talk about removing of resentment there to some extent. The final little tiny minute resentment that may exist when you come to the mindfulness of breathing, well, that will be removed. But that will be such a small resentment that it's kind of barely noticeable to most ordinary people.
Thanks, Ajahn. And I think Mani should come to the Sutta retreat as well. Because Ajahn Brahmali teaches the Sutta retreat every year, once a year. We're asking him to do twice, but he only wants to do once. So, and during the retreat, Ajahn always go through the Sutta on 5 ways of removing resentment. So that's a good one.
You're a very good student, Lehar.
Okay, there's another question from Yong Jie An. Equanimity is the last of the awakening factors. What type of equanimity is this? Is it a jhana factor?
Yes, because it comes after samadhi, right? So because it comes after samadhi, it is the equanimity that you have after coming out of samadhi. And quite specifically, it is the equanimity of the 4th jhana, because that is where the equanimity reaches its pinnacle at that particular point. So yes, this is the equanimity of very profound equanimity, not kind of the ordinary everyday equanimity where you walk around and you don't feel any aversion or attraction, but a deep kind of equanimity.
Thanks, Ajahn. I think those are the only 2 questions. We've got about 70 people who has logged in online.
Okay,
yeah.
Excellent. Welcome all 70. Well, nice to have you here. So, all right.
Ajahn, do you want to do the 5 minutes meditation?
That's true. We should really have 5 minutes. Actually, that's a very good idea, because it's good to have that little bit of a break, actually. So let's do 5 minutes meditation and come back to it again. Okay. Okay, so let's carry on. And so we have looked a little bit about the place of Sammāsamādhi on the path. And now I just want to very briefly just do a preliminary definition of Sammāsamādhi so that we can actually discuss it in a bit more detail about how it is defined in the suttas, just to have a starting point, and then we will go into these definitions much more detail in the very last of the 3 workshop classes. But now just to have a preliminary definition so we can talk about it in a way that actually works. And generally speaking, we can say that Sammāsamādhi is defined as the 4 jhānas in the suttas. So the 4 jhānas, of course, are very known factors. And one of the nice things about the 4 jhānas, as we shall see, is that they are explained in quite a lot of detail. So we know we have a kind of foundation for discussing what Sammāsamādhi actually is once we understand that they are the 4 jhānas. This is the one definition that really matters in the suttas. There are a number of definitions, but this is the one that really is important. And I will get back to this in a second, why this is the case. But what about samadhi? Yeah, and this is another interesting and important one, is that samadhi itself is also essentially the 4 jhanas in the suttas. Samadhi is a little bit more broader, and there are kinds of samadhi that are not the 4 jhanas. But when the word samadhi is used on its own, without any qualifier, without any pointer in any different direction, we can assume that that too means the 4 jhanas. And the reason is simply that the 4 jhanas are by far the most important kind of samadhi in the suttas. By far, I mean like by a really long way. It is this is kind of how the Buddha looks at samadhi almost universally. And this is a very important point. It's kind of hard to overestimate how important this particular point is, because it allows us to interpret the suttas in a consistent way throughout. If you read samadhi, you read the 4 jhanas, you will never really go wrong if you do that. If you read other things instead, when you see the word samadhi, chances are you might go wrong as a consequence. I remember one of those little nice pieces of advice that Ajahn Brahmali again talks about. He tells about the trip when he went to Sri Lanka. This was back in 1993 or something like that. It's a long time ago now. And while he was there, he met some very interesting people. And one of the people that he met when he was there was the German monk, Venerable Nyanaponika, who was then the head monk at the forest hermitage in Kandy. This is the Udavatakela Reserve. Do I say that right? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm trying to remember these Sri Lankan names. And this is has become a fairly well-known place, because this is where the Buddhist Publication Society was founded. And if you go to Kandy in the present day, you still find a bookshop there, which is the Buddhist Publication Society. And I visited that myself, actually, when I was in Sri Lanka a few years ago. And in the forest hermitage, a beautiful place in the kind of park area. It's actually like a forest, but it's a kind of a preserved forest area. And in the middle of there, you find this little hermitage, a beautiful little hermitage. And that is where Venerable Nyanaponika stayed back in the, going back to the 1950s, 60s, 70s, maybe not the 50s, I can't remember exactly when, up till he died. He died in the late 90s or something like that. I can't remember now when exactly he died. But he was still alive when Ajahn Brahmali was there. And then one of the things he said to Ajahn Brahmali is that when you read the suttas, you should always focus on the main message, what the plurality of the suttas say, what is the main message throughout. And you should read the rare suttas, the rare things, because there are some things that are very cryptic and hard to understand. They should be understood in line with the main message, not the other way around. We should not interpret the main message in line with the cryptic passages. No, it should be the other way around. And this is a very important point of Dhamma, because it is typical for human beings, and I am no exception, of course, that we focus on those rare things because they are kind of interesting, right? The Buddha says, Anidassana vijnana, Anidassana vijnana. Wow, that sounds really cool. Because the word Anidassana itself is kind of, Anidassana means something like unmanifest or invisible. Yeah, even the meaning of the word is kind of up for grabs. No one really knows exactly what it means. And then, so Anidassana consciousness, invisible consciousness, unmanifest consciousness. You can see why people get excited about this, yeah? This must be something really special. But then what we should really do, instead of then starting with the Anidassana vijnana or apatitita vijnana, all these kind of special states that you find in the suttas, instead of starting with that and interpreting the rest of the sutta as in accordance with that, we should interpret these strange things in accordance with the rest of the suttas. Then we are doing things in the right way. Then we are kind of getting things the right way around. But it is kind of our human tendency, I think, to kind of be interested in the weird stuff, yeah, because that's kind of cool, that's kind of different, that kind of, and we all want to, I don't know, I guess it's kind of, if I can be the one who figures out the real Dhamma, right? There's a lot of that in the Buddhist world, yeah, I have understood the real Dhamma, forget about the last 2,500 years of Buddhist history, everyone has got it wrong, I understand, listen to me here. And there's a lot of things like that in the Buddhist world, whereby someone thinks that they have got the message everyone else has misunderstood. And if that's the case, you have to be very careful. So what this means is that when we have a situation like this, when we're dealing with a word like samadhi, the message then is we should interpret it with the most general meaning of samadhi in the suttas, which is the 4 jhanas. That is really what it comes down to. Okay. So this is the preliminary definition of Sammāsamādhi and Samadhi, meaning the 4 jhanas. And now we can look at it in a bit more detail because of that. So now we're going to look at the importance of jhana, right, in the suttas, because if we know that, then we know that we are actually looking at the importance of Sammāsamādhi at the same time. So the first thing we're going to look at is this very interesting idea that we find in the suttas, that the Buddha discovered jhana. And this is something you find in a few suttas, and I'm going to quote you one sutta right now which talks about this. And this is kind of a fascinating one. And we're going to discuss a little bit what this actually means. Yeah, so the opening amid the confinement, let me just go through this, was discovered by the Buddha of vast wisdom, who woke up to absorption, who woke up to jhana, the sage, the solitary bull. So let's just go back to the top there. Opening amid confinement. So this is a way of talking about samadhi, Sammāsamādhi, the idea of jhana. It is an opening amid confinement. So what is confinement? Confinement is the sensory world. It is the world that we are trapped in right now. Right now we are in the sensory world. We are seeing and hearing and tasting a bit of coffee, and all of that is part of the same sensory world, right? So it is a confinement. It is like the mind is narrowed down. It's like the mind is trapped. The mind is limited. The mind is bounded by these things. And of course, with that, it's not just the confinement of the sensory realm itself, but it's also all the defilements that arise in that particular realm. So this is a confined reality. And the opening then, of course, is the jhana states, is the Sammāsamādhi, where the mind opens up. The mind becomes vast and large, and it also imbued with all of these exceptional qualities that make the mind very powerful, very happy, and very joyful, etc. So this is kind of already very interesting. It's a way of thinking about the world, and as a confined place. And for anyone who has a little bit of meditation experience, you will know that you have some idea what this is about, some idea why this actually is the case. But the full experience of it can really only be had when you go all the way to the jhana states and to Sammāsamādhi. So we are living in confinement. We're living on the path of dust, as it says elsewhere in the suttas. We want to kind of extract ourselves from that. Was discovered by the Buddha of vast wisdom. And then it says, right, so this opening was discovered, who woke up to absorption, he woke up to jhana. So what does this exactly mean, that the Buddha woke up to jhana? And there's a couple of different ways of understanding this. Now, one of the ways, and one of the ways that have been spoken of, one of the ways that Ajahn Brahmali has liked to talk about this, is that the Buddha actually discovered jhana, that there was no such thing as jhana meditation in ancient Buddha prior to the Buddha. And is that correct? And it is actually, many people have dismissed Ajahn Brahm's argument because there seems to be evidence in the suttas that there was jhana meditators at the time. But I think we should be careful to dismiss it too quickly, because there is also some evidence in the suttas that actually it was quite rare to attain samadhi. Yeah, it was not a very common thing. Yeah? And some of the great spiritual leaders at the time, they did not understand jhana. They did not understand what meditation was about. There was a very famous encounter between the householder Chitta, who was a jhana meditator, and the Nigantanathaputta, the leader of the Jains. And when the Nigantanathaputta, the leader of the Jains, heard about samadhi, he dismissed it. He says, there's no such thing, it's impossible. And this was the leader of one of the greatest, largest religious orders at the time of the Buddha. The Jains were probably existed prior to the Buddhists, and they were probably larger movement than the Buddhist movement at the time. And not just that, but there's also another place in the suttas. There's a place where Prince Abhaya, this is in the Abhaya Raja Kumara Sutta, which is this is actually it's a Dantabhumi Sutta. That's right, Majjhima Nikaya 125, where the Prince Abhaya has a discussion with one of the novice monks. And the prince says to the Buddha, says to this novice monk that I have heard that you teach something called samadhi, that you can kind of get out of the ordinary world. And can you please explain? And then this novice monk explains, and at the end of the discussion, the prince dismisses it. That's nonsense, that's impossible. That cannot happen. So there is it is not an entirely illogical conclusion to draw that jhanas were at the very least very rare and not really commonly understood at that particular time. There is a further argument, and that is many of you will have heard of the famous story when the Buddha's awakening experience, when he gradually found the truth of the path, and he was talking to his prior teachers, and they were supposed to have attained some very high states of meditation. What were those states? Were they really the immaterial attainments, as is often understood, or were they a lesser kind of attainment? And there is some evidence to suggest that they were actually a lesser pre-jhanic kind of attainment. So it is more uncertain than it actually seems. Still, I would argue that it is likely that jhana was known, at least in some circles, and so I would interpret this differently. And I would interpret this to mean he woke up to the importance of jhana and Sammāsamādhi in achieving full awakening here. He understood that jhana is not the end of the path. He understood that you don't merge with the cosmos or the universal mind or the universal consciousness when you attain jhana. It is just a factor of the path, and that factor of the path is then what leads to the full awakening. That is how my preferred understanding of this is. So when you woke up to absorption, you woke up to the power, the significance of this as the culmination of the path that then enables the full awakening experience as a consequence. This is what he discovered, the sage, the solitary bull. That is found in the Anguttara Nines. So this underscores the importance of jhana on the path. It was discovered by the Buddha, the power of this particular state to enable meditation, enable the full discovery of the path, or the full results of the path. Now, I want to come to this from a different angle, and this is the angle that we find in the famous sutta called the Mahasacchaka Sutta, and this is Majjhima Nikaya 36, and this is again where the Buddha talks about his life prior to his awakening and how he actually discovered the path to awakening. There's another very interesting that shows us a little bit about how Sammāsamādhi works on the path. I thought, whatever ascetics and Brahmins have experienced painful, sharp, severe and acute feelings due to overexertion, whether in the past, future or present, this is as far as it goes. No one has done more than this. So here, this is the Buddha saying this. Or not the Buddha, it's the Buddha reflecting back to his practice. And he's basically looking back at his own ascetic practices. And we have all read about those ascetic practices in the suttas. He took it really, really to the very limit. And this is what he says here, taking it to the limit. And you go any further and you will die. It's this is as far as it's possible to take it. And that includes all the Jain ascetic practices, which were really, really over the top. You've gone all the way to the end. And of course, when you come to the end point, you need to ask yourself, is there a different way to awakening? This was the standard way of practicing to awakening in ancient India. This was considered the real path. And if you didn't practice like this, you were considered some kind of wimp. Only wimps practiced kind of the happiness. Everyone else, they were tough. They gritted their teeth, and they were kind of really destroying themselves through this kind of practices. But the Buddha, of course, this is the whole point of the Buddha, is that he does not just accept the given things, he investigates. That's kind of what makes him the Buddha. But I have not achieved any superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones by this severe, grueling work. So the Buddha is looking for something profound, superhuman, uttari manusadhamma. The qualities that are beyond ordinary human beings. Distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. The alang arya nanadasana visesa. So these are terms used by the Buddha later on, but the Buddha realized he hadn't really understood properly the kind of the real purpose, the awakening itself. You do all of these things, not getting anywhere, well, you need to think again. Might there be another path to awakening? Could there be another path to awakening? Then it occurred to me, I recall sitting in the cool shade of the rose apple tree while my father, the Sakyan, was off working. Very famous story that every kind of Buddhist has probably heard of this particular story. Sitting in the cool shade of the rose apple tree. It is often said that he was a young boy, maybe not. It's hard to really know exactly what age he was. But the fact that his father was off working and he was sitting there probably seems to think that he was at least reasonably young. Otherwise, he probably would be taking part in the work. And you will notice here that what is interesting here is this idea of the cool shade of the rose apple tree, right? This is kind of fascinating. So why is that fascinating? Well, it's fascinating for this reason. While he was in that cool shade, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome qualities, I entered and remained in the first jhana, which has the rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. So, while sitting in that cool shade, he experienced the first jhana as a child. This is what he remembers, He knows that what he has done so far does not work, the ascetic practices. Is there an alternative path? Well, when I was a child, I was sitting in the cool shade. That cool shade is quite interesting, isn't it? Because it says something about the idea of jhana experiences that happen when you are at ease, when you are relaxed, when the body is not overwrought by pain. It's the opposite of the experiencing of pain, right? You're sitting in the cool shade. And that all is already pointing us towards the idea of the middle way right there. A simple word like that actually has some kind of significance to this. When you are at ease, when you are relaxed, someone else is doing all the work. You're just kind of chilling out under the tree. And then you have this kind of experience. Could that be the path to awakening? Stemming from that memory came the realization that is the path to awakening here. The Buddha is finally seeing something that is different from the whole rest of the world, understanding a different way to the idea of awakening, what actually may be the path. Then it occurred to me, why am I afraid of that pleasure? For it has nothing to do with sensual pleasures and unskillful qualities. And this is the problem. This was the problem of ancient Indian society. Not just ancient Indian society, but you find this in almost all spiritual practices across the world, almost everywhere. The idea of being afraid of pleasure. Because pleasure is often understood to be connected with the body. And of course, if it is connected with the body, well, how can you liberate the mind if pleasure is connected with the body? Pleasure is usually connected with the idea of eating or relationships and these kind of things. So he says, but now he is refining this. He's asking, well, maybe there are certain pleasures that are not connected to the body, that have nothing to do with the five senses, that are beyond this entire realm. So he is kind of rethinking this whole position that existed in all the ancient religions. And this, little things like this, is what makes the Buddha great. The ability to go against the culture, go against the stream of the time, and think things in a new way. It may seem like a small thing, but actually it is a revolution in the entire idea of spirituality at that time. Spirituality meant torturing yourself to the max to somehow liberate the mind from the body. But no, says the Buddha, that is not how you do it. There is an alternative pleasure that actually leads in the right way. Then I thought, I am not afraid of that pleasure, for it has nothing to do with sensual pleasures or unskillful qualities. It's a pure kind of pleasure, and that is why it is acceptable. Not only is it acceptable, but it leads to all of these things that we are trying to, that actually strengthens the mind, imbues the mind with the kind of qualities that make things possible. Then I thought, I can't achieve that pleasure with the body so excessively emaciated. Why don't I eat some solid food, some rice and porridge? So I ate some solid food. Again, this idea of the middle way. The middle way is what works. The body needs to be at ease. The body needs to be relaxed. And when the body is at ease, that is where these things become possible. So this is like the Buddha's discovery of the middle way. And one of the things that you will then see here is that the epitome of that middle way, the culmination of that middle way, the thing that points us to what the middle way really is the jhana experiences. The Buddha talks about the jhana experience, and they are only attainable through this middle way. They are what kind of the pinnacle of what the middle way really is about. So when we talk about the middle way, it is exemplified more than anything else by the jhana experiences. They draw everything else together. Is this exciting? You probably heard this before, so many of this, but I think it's nice to review it anyway. That's my guess anyway. So here, another one. This is another little quote from the suttas. And this is, the Pali is Sammādi maggo, asammādi kummago. And it means something to the effect of stillness is the path, non-stillness is a bad path. So no samadhi is a bad path. No jhana is a bad path. Don't try the dry insight. It's a bad path, says the Buddha. Is that what it means? It could be interpreted in that way, right? Dry insight meditation without any real jhanas. Actually, the Buddha is kind of saying here that it is a bad idea. We should not go down that track. So this is found in the Anguttara 64, the suttas. So very kind of fascinating, All right, so now we come to another aspect of the importance of jhana, And what I want to point out now is how prevalent they are in the suttas. I'm going to look at what is known as the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, 37 aids to awakening. And the 37 aids to awakening were said by the Buddha to be like a summary of his entire teachings, found in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. And because it is a summary of his entire teachings, it means that they have a special place in Buddhism. And all the Dhamma can be said to be contained in those 37 aids to awakening. Satta Tingsa Bodhipakya Dhamma, known as in Pali. So here is a table showing you all 37 in one go. So are you ready? Take a deep breath. Whoa. So this is how you're told. You should never have tables like this when you do your presentation with a slideshow. This is considered bad according to all ideas about how to do presentations. That's why I decided to do it, just to make it really confusing for everyone. There's a famous video presentation online done by a Swedish fellow called Death by PowerPoint, and this is what he meant by Death by PowerPoint. So I've just put it in there because it is kind of nice anyway. It is not too confusing. You get PowerPoints that are much more confusing than this. But you will see there that the 37 aids to awakening, you see the top there, 4 satipatthana, 4 right efforts, 4 factors of spiritual power, 5 spiritual faculties, 5 spiritual power, 7 awakening factors, Noble Eightfold Path. And that adds up to 37 altogether. These are these 37. And you can see there's a large number of factors there, large number of things going on. But when it comes down to it, what you will see is that there is a lot of commonality here. There are many things that occur a number of times. And when we draw together those things that occur in many different places, we get a very interesting overview of the path. This is what comes next here. This is kind of drawing together those things that are similar. So here we go. So the color coding are the things that are basically the same. And so the red ones here, they are the factor of effort or energy on the path, right? And you will see that there are at least 8 different factors that all have to do with energy. And energy and effort is, of course, the 6th factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, right effort. Then you have the green one. This is mindfulness, and again there is 8. This is the equivalent to the 7th factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. And then the blue ones, well, they are about stillness. They are about the Sammāsamādhi on the Buddhist path. And as you can see, there's roughly 8 that have to do with the idea of stillness. So that is 8 times 3, 24. I hope. It's a long time since I went to school, but I think I can still do 8 times 3. 24, and these 3 things then, if you think about them, right effort, right mindfulness, right stillness, these are all about the development of the mind, the cultivation of the mind, in one way or another, either through right effort, or through meditation practice, or through achieving samadhi. So 24 out of 37 are about that. This is how much of that? That's about 2/3 almost, of the path. Not quite, but almost 2/3 are about cultivation of the mind. So in many ways you can say this is kind of the core thing of Buddhist practice, is the cultivation of mind. And a part of that is the idea of Sammāsamādhi, core, essential part of the path. So this is just another way of giving you an angle on the significance of jhānas and Sammāsamādhi on the path. Okay, so this has nothing to do with the Noble Eightfold Path. So I was going to stop there for now, and again open up for some more comments or questions. We only have about 15 minutes till we're going to have this break anyway. So please, let's take some more questions from anyone who might have them here. Anyone like to say anything here?
Veneral?
Yes.
But talking about discovering samadhi, Ajahn Brahm sort of tends that put an idea across that the Buddha trained under Kassapa,
Yeah.
and then he actually came into this world as a once returner. So he would already have knowledge of the practice.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I know Ajahn Brahm likes that idea. I don't know. Yeah, whenever Ajahn Brahm says something, it's good to take it seriously. So I sort of I hear what he says. I'm not entirely convinced, to be honest with you, myself. I tend to, but I would never dismiss anything Ajahn Brahm says out of hand, because I think that's kind of foolish. But I'm not entirely convinced. I also don't accept everything Ajahn Brahm says out of hand either. I tend to be this, try to find the middle way. So one of the things about that you find in the suttas is that, one of the things the Buddha says, for example, in the Majjhima Nikaya 26, the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, the Noble Search, he meets Upaka. Upaka is this Ajivaka ascetic who's wandering around, and he is the first person who meets the Buddha. Well, maybe not. And there's also the two merchants, Tapusa and what's his name? Baluka, is that right? Baluka, Tapusa and Baluka. Okay, probably Baluka. Yeah, okay. And so they may have been the first ones. But in the suttas, this Upaka, the Ajivaka, is the first one. And when he says to the Buddha, he meets the Buddha. And it's a very interesting meeting, because he obviously can tell that this person is someone special, right? He says, "Wow, your faculties are pure. Yeah, you are amazing. What happened to you, mate?" Yeah? He didn't use the word mate, but and then the Buddha says, "Well, I found this awakening. I found the deathless." And he says, "Well, who is your teacher?" And he says, "I have no teacher. I discovered this by myself." That's what he says there. And then, of course, Upaka famously shakes his head and walks off in the wrong direction. That's kind of the famous story there. But the Buddha is essentially saying, I have no teacher at that particular point. It seems to me that the Buddha is sort of contradicting the idea that he may have, this is not absolute certainty, of course, but it looks like he's saying, well, basically, this is my own discovery of this path. It's not something I got through someone else. That would be one of my counter-arguments. My other counter-argument would be that, well, if you already have right view, which the Buddha would have had if he was a once returner, he wouldn't go through all of those ascetic practices. He would know what the path was already. Why would it take all that time, torturing himself for many years, and then discovering the path? A stream mentor should have, in my opinion, already have internalized those things. So I'm a little. I agree with Ajahn Brahm on so many things, but this is the only place where I'm kind of tiny bit skeptical about his suggestion. But as I said, I always take what Ajahn Brahm says very seriously, so I wouldn't dismiss it fully either.
But he would have surely, under the practice of another Buddha, he would have actually reached the jhana states. So he would have taken that with him. He could not leave them behind.
We don't know what he reached. We don't know whether he only lived that life for a very short period, that he maybe he ordained late in life. We just have no idea what happened. There's almost no information available. We can speculate, we can make guesses about it, but we don't actually know. And this is kind of the problem. So maybe he attained jhanas, maybe he didn't, maybe he was a stream mentor, maybe he was not. It's just at the end of the day, it's speculation really. And that's kind of, I think, the problem here. Say again? Is there a rose apple tree around here? We should have a rose apple tree. That's a good point. Yeah, so that we can kind of sit under even better, we have Bodhi trees around here, right? That's even better. So we can sit under the Bodhi tree. There's a big one just over there by the community hall.
Just following on from Michael's question, Ajahn.
Yeah.
My understanding was if someone attained stream entry or one of the higher attainments and they were reborn, they'd have to rediscover the path again. So they may still have, difficulties or perhaps go to extreme practices.
Well, the right view will be there, because once right view has been discovered, it will be inside of them somewhere. It may not be explicit, however. It may not actually. They may not. If you ask them, they may not be clear about what it is. And in that sense, they have to rediscover it, maybe to be able to explain it or whatever. But it will still be part of them, because once you have seen something, it can never really be undone. Yeah, it's like so. Deep down, it will be there. But so I still think that they would know intuitively that ascetic practices don't work. Yeah, it will be obvious, and that's why they 7 lifetimes at the most. Even if they don't practice anything, it would be 7 lifetimes at the most. Yeah.
The other question I had, Ajahn, was what is wrong samadhi?
Okay, we're coming to that later on.
Okay.
It's part of the course. Yeah, wrong samadhi is part of the course. Yeah, so you don't go down that path. Yeah, don't do wrong samadhi. Yeah. Mahinda over here. Yeah.
Ajahn, I have heard before Gautama Buddha, there had been many more Buddhas in the previous. The doctrines are similar to, or if there's any record of it, or how do you interpret that?
You're asking whether the teachings are the same?
Yeah.
I mean the insight. The insight will be the same, because awakening will be the same for everyone. You waken up to suffering, impermanence, non-self. That will be the same. How you express that awakening in words will maybe slightly different, but it will point in the same direction. So it will be equivalent in a certain way. But I would guess that the wording may be different for each particular Buddha. So the path will be the same path, but maybe it can be expressed in a different way. Maybe it has 9 factors. Maybe the previous Buddha talked about the ninefold path, right? I don't know. Because these things can always be expanded and contracted in different ways. That's why the Buddha we have also teaches this in many different ways. We have the 7 awakening factors, the Eightfold Path, the Tenfold Path, the 37 aids to awakening, the whatever. There's many different ways of doing this. But if you look at the ideas, they will be the same. That you have to purify the mind will be the same. That you have to achieve deep stillness will be the same. So the actual content will be the same, even though it is expressed with different words, perhaps. Yeah. Yeah. Right, yeah, exactly. So that you discover the same truth, yeah, and there may even be Pacceka Buddhas in between, all these kind of things. So you have to restart everything from. This is kind of the scary part of it. Yeah, it's all gone. It's all darkness. Everyone is deluded. You're blind. You're stubbing your toes into all the dukkha of the world, and it's hurting. And then the Buddha comes. Okay, the light comes back again in the world.
Path himself. That means he was already under the training of another Buddha, if he was a once returner.
Yes, exactly, and that's why I am a little bit skeptical of that suggestion, because it means that he didn't really discover the path. It was an inheritance from the previous Buddha, and I think that I think the reason why. One of the reasons why Ajahn Brahmali says that is because the knowledge or the understanding of non-self, that insight, is so profound. It is very hard to see how anyone can actually see these things on their own without some kind of support. Yeah, and I think that's probably true. But I think that under certain circumstances it may actually happen, and I think that is kind of the issue here. Is it possible or not to see non-self without some kind of support? That is really the question. And the problem is that if you do rely on a previous Buddha, if the gap between the previous Buddha and the next one is too long, then there will be no bridge across there. Because if you have become a stream enterer in the previous Buddha, you have 7 lifetimes at the maximum, right? 7 lifetimes in the sensory realm can only last maximum of maybe 7 eons according to traditional Buddhist teachings. So what happens if there's more than 7 eons between 2 Buddhas? That means that there is no way you can bridge that gap with someone understanding the teachings under the previous Buddha. You cannot bridge that gap, and so then it will die out, and it's impossible to rediscover it again, unless it can be discovered from afresh. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but there is if you rely on the previous Buddha, then the maximum amount of time you have to kind of re-establish the teaching is actually 7 eons, because after that all those stream mentors will have actually attained full awakening, and it will be too late to kind of re-establish it again. Yeah, there it is. Hello, visitor. Okay, you may be more happy outside. I recommend going outside. Yeah. They're not a disciple, right? Yeah. That's another good point. That's usually the definition of a Buddha, Sammāsamādhi, someone who discovers the path by themselves. Yeah. So yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Ajahn, there are 2 questions online. Do you want to take the 2 questions?
Please. Yeah.
Okay. The first one is, hello, Ajahn Brahmali. As I know the prerequisites. I think you want to ask a question as well. Okay. As I know, the prerequisites for Sammāsamādhi is the absence of 5 hindrances. So how could we effectively eliminate them to get into Sammāsamādhi?
Well, this is what the full, the 7 first factors of the Noble Eightfold Path are all about. Yeah, if you go back to the previous workshops, they're all really about precisely that question: how to eliminate the 5 hindrances. And and so it starts off. You start off by eliminating the 5 hindrances just by being kind, by living well, by practicing right speech. By you cannot have the defilements cannot be too coarse if you're going to live with kindness. That you're already eliminating defilements by living well. So that's how you start, and then you start by reflecting in the right way, by thinking about people in the right way, by having more compassion, by not getting angry when you see people do bad things. Instead, you have compassion for them because they don't really know what they're doing. By understanding the limits of the sensory realm, it's confined, it narrows you down, it is impermanent, it's inherently unreliable. You don't want to be holding on to the sensory realm. It's madness. The sensory realm is really, really problematic. So you start to understand these things, and as you understand these things, you are guiding your mind in a different direction. You're overcoming the attachments to the sensory world. You're overcoming your ill will and aversion because you have more compassion for people. You understand that people actually are trapped in their personality. They are trapped in their habits from the past and all of these kind of things. And as you do that, you have compassion rather than getting ill will when you see people doing bad things. And this is really how you do it. And then gradually you overcome this. And then you start doing your meditation practice. And the final and the last defilements are overcome simply by watching the breath and overcoming the defilements in that way.
Okay, there's another question online. What is the relation between Sila and the awakening factors? Is there a point where Sila should be the only focus until a refined point where Sila is well mastered?
Sila is really only fully mastered once you become a stream enter. That's when you have you are perfect in Sila according to the suttas. Prior to that point, you have to keep on practicing Sila all the way through. So Sila is really the foundation for the awakening factors. Without the Sila, the awakening factors don't really work properly. The more profound your Sila is, the more powerful the awakening factors are going to be. So Sila is just so critical. And I always like to remind people that when we talk about Sila, is that wrong speech or is that... Well, so when we talk about Sila, we're talking about something very profound in Buddhism. We're not talking about merely keeping the 5 precepts or merely, so people often, when I think that people don't even keep the 5 precepts, I kind of despair. For goodness sake, at least keep the 5 precepts. This is so fundamental to the practice. And I think one of the wonderful things about our Buddhist society is that we have a lot of people who keep the 5 precepts. But that is like a minimum. That's like a starting point. Yeah, and we need to take our sila much, much further than that if we're going to have any real success in meditation practice. And it is about the opposite of the precepts. It's about generosity. It's about being kind. It's about showing concern for other people, having compassion for others. It's about how we think about other people. It's about how we perceive other people. Yeah, and all of these things. And only then does your sila become purified. It's about metta. It's about karuna. Yeah, loving kindness and compassion and these kind of things. That is where the sila really becomes purified. And that is really what we should all aim for. So the Buddhist spiritual path is actually very demanding. It is demanding of a very, very high standard for how to live well. And that is the sila that is required. And only then will these awakening factors really come together based on that. All right, is that it? We have 2 minutes left to go before we call it a morning. Anyone want to say anything? What about the newcomers? You want to ask any questions? Is it all clear? Crystal, yeah? That's wonderful. So please don't be afraid of asking so-called stupid questions, because the stupid questions are usually actually the best ones. It's not really stupid at all. I know what it's like when you think your question is stupid, you kind of become shy, but actually everyone else wants to ask exactly the same question. That's kind of the interesting part, how this... So we are...
Just thinking about lay people who are wanting to get better insights, perhaps not reaching jhana, but want to, in this life, have conditions that they can carry to the next life as well, so that we are continually getting better. So looking at the Eightfold Path, I think of it as a circular thing. So my right stillness might not be jhana, but I get still enough that my view is being changed to a better view. So it's gradual, it's circular. And my question is also similar to a question, do I then, whatever I achieve in this life, small insights, do I carry that into the future?
It depends what kind of insight it is. There are insights that you might call... it only goes 3 times, so thank you for only going 3 times. So there are insights that are like intellectual insights, where you think about something, and they may be lost from one life to another one because they are superficial in a sense. But the insights that go to the core of your, like, are more feeling, when you actually, wow, they are visceral. You can actually, they have a really powerful emotional impact. If you really see dukkha or you see impermanence, it's going to feel very powerful for you. And that will make an impact on your mind that you will take with you into your next life in a much more powerful way. So it depends on what kind of insight it is and how you do that. But generally speaking, however you develop your mind in this life, whatever you do in terms of whether it's the sila or it's samadhi or even just understanding the suttas or whatever, you will bring that with you because there will be something that lies within you. Our personality is what we carry with us into the future. All the superficial thinking will disappear, but the deeper personality will actually go with you into the future. So... yes, so it's actually a good idea. It's always a good idea to do as much as we can in this life, and then we take the things with us into the future lives. Okay, everyone, so that is it for this morning. So just to remind you what Leihai was saying, 12 o'clock there will be a breakout session, and then after that there will then be at 12:30 I'll come back and we continue the course after that.